I really think the holidays don't need to be a time where you give up your healthy goals. People think that to enjoy the holidays, to enjoy their old favorites, they need to break with their healthy lifestyle. And you really don't. I mean, there's almost always a way to make the things that you love and enjoy in a much healthier way.
Yay Networks.
A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. All right, y'all, we are talking holiday baking and thinking of holiday baking, not just for cookies or the things like that you might be baking as gifts or things, but also it could be savory. What are you baking for the different events or dinners or things that you have going through the holidays? And baking can also be such a creative way to put together gifts for neighbors, teachers, all these people in our life that we're looking at. What do I do that can be maybe cost effective, but you also want it to be really beautiful and thoughtful? Baking can tie in with all of these. So as we're talking about holiday baking, kind of think broad spectrum. And I have a special guest with us today. She is an expert in this. And after you hear this podcast with her, you're going to wish, like I wish, that we could just live like maybe in her basement and be a tester, because Carolyn Ketchum is so incredibly talented in all of these spaces. So welcome, Carolyn.
Hi, so good to be here again.
Every time you tell me what you're experimenting with, I'm like, why do you live so far away from me? Why am I not your neighbor?
Yeah. I have a lot of people wishing they were my neighbor because I bake so much that I always have to give stuff away too.
So tell us about All Day I Dream About Food, about the website and your background, your expertise.
Sure. I have been writing All Day I Dream About Food for almost 13 years now.
Oh
Isn't
my
that
gosh.
crazy?
Yes.
And I started it because I had gestational diabetes with my youngest and it didn't really fully resolve. And I decided that the best way to manage my health was to go on a low carb diet. But baking had always been my thing, if you will. I just always loved it. And so I couldn't let it go. And I had to start experimenting with new products and different ingredients, and kind of built a knowledge base based on playing with almond flour and coconut flour and alternative sweeteners and what works here. And, I love doing it.
Because of course, if we're talking about baking on this podcast on Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, I didn't even preface that in the beginning. Like I assume everyone knows when we're talking about baking, of course it's healthy holiday baking. But that's specifically Carolyn's approach is low carb. Not everything is gluten-free, but I would say almost all of much of what you do.
Almost all of it. Yeah.
Much of what you do is gluten-free. So the almond flours, the coconut flours, on your website, you have a lot of resources on how to use these ingredients. You have a book, The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking, it's like a teaching Bible for this.
Yeah, I mean, that was my goal when I wrote the book, was to take everything that was in my head for the past decade, all the experiments. And I had some failures, sure, of course I did. But I learned a lot, and I just, really kind of put it into a book that was my version of one of my favorite cookbooks in my previous life, was the America's Test Kitchen baking book, because they love to experiment and they tell you what works best for this and why this doesn't work here. And that's why I really kind of wrote it that way, was just what works, what doesn't work, what's going to happen if you sub this for the other. And sometimes I'd say that in low carb baking, it's even more difficult because you don't just have flour and sugar. You have almond flour, coconut flour, pecan flour, like a billion different flours that behave differently. And then the sweeteners are completely different too. So you really just have to know what you're doing when you go to sub one for the other.
So as we're talking about this, we mentioned a minute ago that we're talking about things that could be gifts that you would give to your neighbors, teachers, etc. But also Carolyn's book, if you have someone who is into baking, and they're also into like wellness, nutrition, or even just into one or the other and want to kind of expand their horizons in the other space, this book is a great holiday gift. So we're talking about baking, but also her book would be the gift. And one of the things that I love doing with that is gifting a book and then also gifting some of the ingredients to make one of the dishes from it. So
I
the
love that
oh
idea.
my
I
gosh.
love that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's especially if it's maybe one of the harder to find ingredients to say, like, take all excuses off the table. Here you go. Um,
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
so many of the recipes that you and I will be talking about today will also say that people can find many of them on alldayidreamaboutfood.com. You have a really organized recipe catalog, basically, that people can search.
Yes.
So we won't be posting the links to all of the recipes that we talk about because I know that once we get started, there's going to be a lot. And so as you're hearing something that you're like, ooh, I would love to know about, Carolyn's peppermint biscotti, going to her website, alldayidreamaboutfood.com, search in there biscotti or search peppermint, and she has it. It's so organized. You can see not only the recipes that we're going to talk about, because probably almost all, if not all, that we're going to be talking about will be searchable on her site. You'll find those, but then you're also going to find so many more that may have similar ingredients or related. And then again, you can see not only the recipe, but you can see all of Carolyn's tips on here's mistakes to avoid, or if you're using these different ingredients, be mindful of these things. And so you can kind of see all of the caveats and the guidance on her website. So for the purposes of this, we're just going to be talking about like really fun ideas and hopefully getting you jazzed to want to like find more options and find more. So think of Carolyn as your resource. Her website, alldayidreamaboutfood.com, and then her book is The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking. So with that, Carolyn, okay, we talked last week knowing that we were going to be doing our interview today,
Hmm.
and we kind of have it divided into two categories. One, gift giving type baking, and the other being event type baking, whether it's parties, you're
Hmm.
hosting it or you're bringing it. Which one do you want to start with?
Okay, let's go with the gifts
Okay.
first.
If you're gifting something edible, what are the things that you're doing?
Well, okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on that. I start really early for one thing, because one of the things that I always loved as a kid was getting that, cookie plate from a neighbor that had a couple of everything, and it had like six different things. And and so if you don't do that, if you don't start early, then you're killing yourself 3 days before Christmas trying to
Right.
create six different cookies.
And it's
So
anything but
I
holiday cheer. You're just like
Right,
grumpy that you
exactly.
committed to this.
Exactly. And people are stressing out, and
Right.
I don't want to do that. So I focus on the ones that can be frozen and that have like a firm texture a lot of the time. So there's a lot of good cookie recipes like biscotti, which we've talked about, shortbread. You can even freeze dough a lot of the time, which works really well for like, okay, I've prepared the dough. Now all I need to do is slice and bake it. Or some of them you can freeze in balls, so that you just freezing ahead of time just saves you time when they are closer to the holidays. So I that's what I focus on first, is those ones.
So when you say you could freeze it and then slice and bake it, or you said freeze it, shaping it into balls and then freezing it like that. So then you would just spread them out onto the baking sheet and bake them.
Yes,
And
and if you freeze them in balls, it's always good to get them to not stick to each other. You freeze them on a cookie sheet first, like in their ball shape, and then you can dump them into a bag or a reusable container, freezable container, and they won't stick to each other.
And then, so things like shortbread or biscotti or things like these sugar cookies. And again, all of these or most of these are going to be gluten free that Carolyn has. And let's say this, the gluten free is not because gluten is inherently bad. We're not, it's not, that isn't so much the reason why. But when you look at the quality of flours, almond flour, coconut flour, nutritionally are just so much better. And they have that,
Hmm.
they look so much more like a regular cookie. You don't have whole wheat pastry flour, so you don't have a grainy looking sugar cookie.
Hmm.
They look like the real
Hmm.
thing. So when we say gluten free, that's really more of a function of because the attributes that we would want with the almond flour or others.
Yes, but caveat there is also it depends on the quality. Like, unfortunately, there are lots of what they call they call themselves finely ground almond flour, and you can see the flecks.
The specs, yeah.
Whereas really good almond flour, it just bakes up as if it were regular flour. I mean, you can't sub one for the other, that's for sure. But when you follow a recipe that specific for almond flour, you don't see little flecks or grains. So
And that's
it's
something
hard to know though.
yeah. Sometimes the packaging, you can see the flour through it. So that would be sort of a tip
Mhm.
to see, is it
Yes.
okay? And so cookies, like a cookie plate, a cookie swap, starting with some of those that can be frozen, which many, many, many baked goods just in general can be frozen. And
Yep.
then you would typically recommend freezing versus the refrigerator for cookies once they're made.
I would, because it freezes them more freshly. So
Hmm.
if you stick them in the even they become more stale in a fridge faster
Right.
than in a freezer. So the minute you put them in the freezer, you've stopped the staling process. Is that even a word? I don't know. But you've stopped them going
Hmm.
stale in their tracks. In the fridge, they'll go stale more
Yeah.
slowly than on the counter, but they will go stale. Plus, in a fridge, unless they're in an airtight container, they can start taking on the flavors of anything
Right.
else you've got going on in your fridge. So if you got like a garlic paste, they might start
Right.
absorbing the garlic paste
Right. So
smell.
airtight
So
container, freeze it, keeps them as close to fresh, and making them ahead of time. You can do the cookies or you can do the dough, freeze it, and then
yep,
you'll usually glaze, like you would make the cookie ahead of time and then maybe glaze closer to the time of gifting it.
I would say so. And
Mhm.
even if you're adding chocolate or anything, it just, because things do change consistency a little bit in the
Yeah.
freezer, I would plan on doing the hard, like the sort of hard cookie
Yeah.
first, and then doing any decoration later so it stays looking more glossy and shiny as you want it to.
You're right, because sometimes they fade a little or they get a little
Hmm.
ashy looking.
Yes,
Yeah, a little chalky.
exactly.
And so cookie plate was one. Another that you shared with me, I thought was, I love this idea, is like jars that have like your layered mixes, like so a cocoa mix
Yes.
or a brownie mix.
Yeah, so I did a YouTube video on how to make your own brownie mix, because I do this all the time when I'm going on vacation, and I put together a mix of, say, brownie mix or sometimes cookie mix, and I just take all the dry ingredients except one is not dry, and that's vanilla. You can get vanilla powder, but it still works with regular vanilla. If you put it into your dry ingredients, but you sort of, and I recommend doing this in a food processor if you can, so that it really disperses the vanilla. It's usually not enough to wet the dry ingredients so much that you have to worry about it. So you can actually add vanilla into your
Right.
dry ingredients.
Which is
So
really cool. Yeah.
you can either mix it all up for them and put it in like a nice bag with a nice card that tells them, add 3 eggs and, some heavy cream or whatever the rest for. Or you can do I've done layered biscotti mixes before, where it's, the almond flour at the bottom and then a layer of the sweetener and the chocolate chips or the pecans or whatever you're adding in there. And it looks really pretty. And then you do the same thing. You put a little nice little card on it that says, add this, add that, and mix and bake kind of thing.
I love it. And then it's one of those things that we get that for hot cocoa, we get it for brownie mixes, we get it for other things. And so it's just taking that same thought process and then flipping it a little bit. And again, we've talked before, and I forgot to mention this, but Carolyn has joined me for this podcast multiple times, and I'll link back to the other episodes that Carolyn's been on, because there's so much education each time. And on other episodes, we've even done a deeper dive on the educational part. This is where we just want to get y'all thinking about like fun stuff you can do for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And always one of the things that we've said, and you always are kind of reiterating, is like, because the flowers behave differently than regular flowers, it's something that there's definitely an art and a science to this. And so that's why I keep telling you, turn to Carolyn as your resource, because she's done all this work for you. And so you're not having to kind of guess or take your favorites. If you're really seasoned in this space and you have a lot of experience, then you're probably going to be like much more comfortable with trying your own recipes that you've made for years and flipping them to be, almond flour instead of white flour, or the plant-based sweeteners instead of sugar. But if you're relatively new to it, make it easy on yourself. Just let Carolyn provide this guidance for you. Um,
Right. I completely agree. I'm just going to jump in there quickly and say, like, for at the beginning, follow tried and true recipes, either
yeah,
mine or, somebody else's, because you get a feel for the ingredients and you realize that almond flour does not behave like wheat flour, and you can't just sub one for the other. So,
Right.
and then, yeah, and then you get a handle on it and you start being able to experiment and add in your own flavors and try it out this way, and etc.
So cookie plates, the jars with layered mix. I love anything that's in like a cylinder or a jar or layers. I love just the way
Mm-hmm.
that looks. What are some of your other kind of go-to gift ideas to recommend to people for this is the type of thing that I look at for bringing to people at the TV station or to our neighbors where you may have 4, 5, 6, 10 people that you're gifting. And so this can be a way to do that kind of en masse.
Yeah, you can do lots of like cakes and loaves too. Last year I found this really cute pan. I think it's by Nordic Ware, and it's called a cakelet pan, so like little cakes. And they look like Christmas trees or evergreen trees. And I did those, and I did my gingerbread, cream cheese gingerbread pound cake in that, and it came out perfectly. And I dusted them with powdered swerve confectioners, and put them into little cellophane.
Cellophane.
There we go, cellophane bags, and tied it with a nice ribbon. People loved that. And then they could just, they weren't huge cakes, but you can do mini loaves too. Get a
Yes.
mini loaf pan. You can, there's some nice parchment paper pans that you can do too. So you can bake right into the pan and then just wrap it up once it's cool and take it to someone.
So you're actually
So
gifting the parchment paper pan itself. It's like a disposable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So they can just sort of peel it off
Mhm.
later and use it. I always recommend parchment paper though, not regular paper for keto baked goods, because they will stick to
Okay.
regular regular cupcake liners. You'll lose half of your cupcake
Yes.
to the paper.
Good to
So,
know. So
well, you could even do that. Now that I think about it, you could even do that with silicone molds too. If you're willing to pay for and give away a silicone mold, you can bake it right into the silicone mold and then give that away too.
if it's like the little individuals or the onesies, depends on how much you like the person, how close
Yeah,
you
I
are
guess
with
so.
them. Am I willing to separate from this for them? What
For
about
sure.
like truffles or just like balls?
Yes, I love balls. My friends have a joke that if I go to any event, they have to have some Carolyn's balls,
It's
and it
true.
could be sometimes it's. I know that sounds terrible, but sometimes it's truffles, sometimes it's sausage balls, because those are always tasty. But
Oh,
I have a lot of different truffle recipes. Classic truffles, which are just chocolate through and through, they're on the soft side, so they can be a little tough to gift unless you're gifting closer to the time. But truffles that are sort of more, say a cake didn't turn out properly, you can always turn it into truffles. You add some cream cheese and some butter, and you roll it into balls, and then you dip it in chocolate, and there you go. You've got a cake truffle. So
I
that's one of my
love
favorite things.
our listeners are going to be like, seriously, like to you, that seems like you're like, and then you just whip it up, like because you're also about like no mess, nothing wasted, if at all possible.
Nothing. Yeah.
So again, search Carolyn's site because she'll have examples of this, in truffles. You had pointed out that specifically using like, if you've got the truffles and you mentioned some of them might be a mushier type of a texture, but you
Mhm.
can use like the pretty little foil lined cupcake liners and put them into a little
Yeah.
box. And then it's like your own homemade box of chocolates.
I love that. And I love doing that. And the pretty little, like the gold and silver ones,
Mm-hmm.
those are gorgeous. And then you can also do that. You could do something similar and make your own chocolates there are molds out there, silicone molds that are shaped like chocolates. And you can brush them with some sugar-free chocolate and do whatever filling. Sometimes I do a lot of peanut butter ones, and then top them with more chocolate, and they pop out and they look like regular chocolate, so that somebody can just bite into. So that's fun too. And you can put those in pretty foil liners and in a box.
And so with that, like if you had a mold, like going, like let's just say it was a candy cane shaped mold, you wouldn't
Mhm.
just pour it with the chocolate because otherwise you could, but then you would just have your,
Solid chocolate.
solid chocolate. And again, everything that we're talking about that Carolyn does is low carb. Almost all of it would be keto friendly. And
Yes.
almost all of it is also gluten free. So when we're saying chocolate or we're talking about all these things, of course, just translate for yourself that this is a recipe that Carolyn would have that would be using cocoa and a plant-based sweetener like Swerve and, and such. So just, being clear, but kind of replace that as everything that we're talking about definitely falls under that lens. So if you have like a mold that's a candy cane shape, you could take your chocolate mix, your batter that you have, and pour it into that candy cane shape, and you would have a solid chocolate candy cane. Or like you said, you would just brush it and then fill it with another filling.
Yeah, so I would take, say it's a mold, a candy cane that works for me. So you just, I usually use a spoon because a chocolate brush you lose too much chocolate on it, and I don't like to waste anything. So take a spoon and just kind of paint it almost up the sides of your, and good idea is to do it twice. So you do it once, stick it in the freezer, do it again so that all the little thin spots get a good coating of chocolate. Then you can take any filling. You could do a peppermint filling. You could do caramel. I have a fabulous keto caramel sauce. You could do, I like to do melted peanut butter with some Swerve, powdered Swerve in it and a little vanilla, and put that as your filling. And then you freeze it again. And then once you take it out, you can top it with more chocolate on the very top so that then when you've got a filled chocolate essentially.
Is it delicate as you're popping it out of there? Like, should you brush it with anything so it doesn't stick, or is that not an issue?
No, not with silicone. Silicone, as long as it's a nice flexible mold. Some of them are a little thicker, but the flexible, really sort of thinner, flexible ones, always put it on a cookie tray when you're trying to fill it and all that stuff. So you're
Yeah.
not bobbling it around and spilling everything. But things pop out really easily most of the time. And the nice part is because you don't have to temper the chocolate. Now, I will honestly admit I've never successfully tempered sugar-free chocolate. I haven't tried very much. You have to use a ton of chocolate for it. It gets expensive. But when you tempering chocolate is a way of heating it and letting it cool and heating it again and letting it cool so that it stays shiny when you use it as a
Mm.
cover for something. But the nice thing about the molds is the way the chocolate sits inside the mold, that when you when you pop it out, it has like a nice, smooth, shiny finish.
Hmm. Yeah,
So I
true. Sometimes even
recommend doing it.
the bottom would be a little dull, the part exposed to the air, but then the part that was protected is shiny. So
Yeah.
brushing it, and you use the back of a spoon, and then you brush it, fill that mold, kind of just uh, get the outer coating of it, freeze it,
Yeah.
do that twice to make sure you don't have any little holes in there. You could do a filling, like you said, you have that great low carb caramel sauce, or you could use peppermints. Like Lily's has the white chocolate peppermint chips. And so you could probably melt
Hmm.
those and use that as a filling if it was just something quick. And then you're freezing that again. And then the last step would be to brush it over the top after it's all frozen. So now you have like all sides coated, and then freeze it again.
Yeah.
And when you're freezing it,
Yeah.
it's really quick. It's not like you've got to do it for hours. Like if you were doing a few different like sheet pans worth, by the time you're done with one and you get it in there, it's almost going to be
Yeah.
ready. Like once you go through this circuit of it, it's going to be time for that one to come out and get its second coating. Like they freeze relatively quickly.
Right. Those they really do. They basically freeze in 30 minutes or less because your coating is so thin.
What about fudge? Is that something that you've done or you give as a gift?
I have for sure. I love fudge. I have a really great peanut butter fudge that makes great gifts. My neighbor calls it, I can't remember what he calls it, but it's something akin to like peanut butter magic whenever I give them some. And that one I love because it's really easy to make and it's easy to cut up. And it actually, unless you live in a pretty humid, hot environment, it actually stays pretty firm at room temperature, which is nice. You don't have to sock it away. That's another one that you can cut up really nicely and pop into little foil lined with
Yes.
like cupcake liners and do it nicely in a box. You can also, oh, I just had a thought of one and now I can't remember what it was. Darn it.
I
Darn
was
it.
going to ask you the presentation of that, how to do something, how you would do if you did do the molds filled with chocolate. I think the cupcake liners are good for anything that's like little bites or like delicate pieces, something that you just want to not have it like all kind of flopping around on the bottom of a box. The jars for like the layered mixes. It depends on like if you're doing the biscotti, you could put those in a cellophane pack or like a wide ball jar, like a mason jar,
Mm-hmm.
wide and
Yep.
short.
Yeah, you could do that. I like to do it. I get, go to places like World Market and they have little Christmas bags and I
Yeah.
just do them in the little Christmas bags. Target carries stuff like that too. I got these
Yes.
really cute ones, or sometimes they have ones that look like Chinese food takeout containers, but they have holiday
Yes.
prints on them. Those are really cute.
And then with that, would you put something inside of it to kind of protect it, or it just depends on what it is?
I think it depends on how you're giving it to someone
Mm-hmm.
because, for me, I'm usually in person just kind of handing something to somebody, um, and saying, here you go. One thing, and this is really important, I've started to do is if you have a strong tasting thing, say you have a peppermint thing and you have a bunch of other cookies like ginger, those have strong flavors and they might, what I call, infect each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're putting together things like that all together in one package, wrap them up separately somehow and then put them in the package because they will, like I say, infect each other with their
Mm-hmm.
flavors, and then you get a muddy ginger slash peppermint slash coffee slash whatever
Right.
funny little flavor. So keep that in mind when you're doing one of the plates that's like or plates or boxes or something that's a variety of things.
Especially when it's going to be something that's like sort of like all compact in the same little airspace. Like you said, the little
Right.
takeout containers, they're kind of like all sharing the same air. So if you did have that, I love the idea of, again, those little foil miniature cupcake liners we're talking about in the bottom of like a little holiday themed takeout box. And then if you've got one that has particularly strong aromas, maybe doing a little bit of a cellophane around that with a little ribbon
Yeah.
to keep it
Yeah.
separate. And so
Yeah.
being creative, the little takeout boxes that are holiday themed, or little cellophane pouches. The ball jars are kind of like miniature squat type
Hmm.
mason jars. Any of those, or like you said, the little parchment paper loaf pans, or a silicone little gifting it in the little silicone shape itself.
Hmm.
Any of those things, you do that, you throw some festive ribbon on it, and an ingredient card or an instruction card if you need to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. And for some of these, if there's something that is best fresh, you can put that in your card too. Like,
Yes.
get it into the fridge or eat immediate or eat over the next 3 days kind of thing.
Okay. And
So
then anything else in the gifting space?
yeah, I mean, you could do savory stuff for that kind of thing too. Oh, you know what would be lovely? I just thought of this. I always go to places like Williams Sonoma and I see their scone mixes, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I can make a scone mix. You
Right.
know, that's another one that I would love as it, and you can put that in pretty bags, and or you could make a sugar cookie mix with my sugar cookie recipe, of course, and give somebody a couple of cookie cutters for it too, and attach them to the
Yes.
bag or the jar.
Do you have a recipe for cheese straws?
I do, as a matter of fact. They're very good, but they're a little on the fragile side, but they're really good.
Our neighbor, our neighbor he's probably in his late 30s, and boy, I always wonder, is he really baking these every holiday, or is his mom helping him? Because they're really good. And he's typically for years did like a little cinnamon sugar cookie, and they're really, really thin. They're really, really crispy.
Hmm.
And if at court, if you're listening, I mean, it's just regular sugar, it's regular flour. Like, he's not making them to be healthy, but I completely appreciate the fact that he makes these gifts. Brad looks forward to it every year. They're just like a really good, like melt in your mouth, like thin, crispy
Yeah.
thing. That this
Yeah.
past year, he made like, it was like cheesy and savory version of that.
There are a couple ways you can do that. The straws they tend to be fragile because you usually pipe them out with like a star tip. But if you do a cookie press and you make them like, they still call them cheese straws, but they're almost more like Spritz cookies and they're more like, but they're savory. It works. They're a little less fragile. So you could do them like that. And you could do, I don't know, cheddar and sage or cheddar and thyme or Parmesan rosemary. Oh, you're giving me ideas.
Yes.
Now I
Okay.
just want to eat these
And so
things.
on your website, do you have them listed as cheese straws as your base recipe?
I do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And for
Yep.
anyone who's
Cheddar
not
cheese
familiar
straws.
with cheese straws, I think most people are. If you've had them, then you know it and you love them. And if you haven't, they're almost like a cookie texture, like a shortbread cookie texture, but they're
Yeah.
savory
Mm-hmm.
and cheesy.
Yep. And they sort of have a sandy texture because the
Yeah.
cheese seems to make them a little, not softer isn't the right word, but a little more tender. But they're both dry-ish and tender at the same time. I love them.
They're really fantastic. And is it normally like there's flour, butter,
Hmm.
cheese. And so you're making them
Cheddar.
without having the white flour in there.
I got to remember in that recipe, I think it's mostly almond flour with a
Uh-huh.
little bit of coconut flour to help kind of the difference between almond flour and coconut flour. Almond flour has got a lot of moisture because it's almonds, and it's basically ground almonds. And so it has a lot of sort of fat and moisture in it, healthy fats, but fat nonetheless. And coconut flour, on the other hand, is the byproduct of making coconut milk. And so all the oil has been pretty much pressed out. So it's very low fat. And so it helps dry it. It gives me a good consistency to use a little bit of both, mostly
Mhm.
almond flour with a little coconut flour to firm things up. And I do that a lot for recipes where you want a more firm, crisp
Mhm.
texture.
Okay. And I just pulled up like a traditional cheese straw recipe, like just a Pauladine cheese straw recipe.
Mm-hmm.
And for
Yes,
every
classic
two
Pauladine.
for every 2 cups of shredded cheese, there's 2 cups of white flour. So
Uh-huh.
it's a lot of just of white starch in there. So while we call them cheese straws, they're really heavy on the white flour. And so yes, I'm absolutely going to look at your recipe for that. I'm so glad that I asked on that. So
Yeah.
those are some really good sweets, some really good savories. And then tell me, I think the cheese straw. So when we're talking about kind of shifting to events or when we have someone coming over, like you said, the cheese straws are a little delicate, but that could also work if you're just going to put them out as sort of like, a little snack thing when people are coming over for a holiday event.
Absolutely. Yeah, those would be perfect for that. Um, yeah, I for years and years, my husband and I did a cocktail slash dessert party, although it did have some, and people would bring things, and this was all before I went keto. So the most things were, but I would spend ages prepping various little finger sized desserts because I love one of my favorite meals in the entire world is basically finger food. I love having appetizers for dinner and dessert appetizers too. I love just standing around and being able to sample a little of everything. That's my honestly my favorite way to eat.
So if you can find a way to get all the nutrients that you're looking for in stand up
Well,
finger
the
food.
veggies, you got to have a veggie. You have a veggie platter.
Yes.
You always have a veggie platter with some dips, and and I
Right. And
I
then
eat
you
those
throw
just as much as everything else.
your Greek yogurt into your dips. And now we've
Uh
got our
huh.
protein and our calcium and our veggies. And no, I'm with you. I really enjoy those types of foods as well. And specifically more savory even than sweet.
Hmm.
While I do really love sweet, when our next door neighbor started making those little cookies that cheesy savory, I was like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we're
Mini
thinking of,
quiches.
yes. Okay, tell us about that. I was going to ask, like, your pie crust, you can make these sweet or savory, and you could also make them as a quiche or a tart.
Yes. And I have a number of quiche recipes on my website, but I want to do some mini quiches for the holidays because and I think I may have to rework the dough a little to make it a little more sturdy to be then pushed into little muffin pan or whatever you decide to do it
Mm-hmm.
in, because I just want it to hold up a little better. And because my other one is just a press in pie crust and it's meant to be pressed in and you just don't think about it, you bake it as is. And this might to kind of cut out perfect little circles and push them into, I might end up having to add a little egg to give them a little sturdiness, but little mini quiches. Or you're talking savory, and I actually remade these recently, and they're fabulous. And I don't know where the recipe sort of originated. It might be the South, but spinach squares.
Yes, I love these. My mother-in-law makes a version of these. Tell me how yours are.
So mine are mostly frozen spinach, some eggs, lots of cheese. I like to do a little crumbled bacon on top, but you don't have to do that. And then it's coconut flour as the flour. And so they're a lot healthier. I mean, there is a lot of cheese in there, so they're still meant to be eaten, moderately. And you can cut them as small or big as you like. I do mine in an 8x8 pan, and so they're thicker, but you could easily spread them out in sort of a larger cookie sheet or a 9x13 pan, and they could be thinner too, so little, and you can make them little bite-sized things as well.
When we're talking about stand-up food, finger food, and that we can feel good about, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also, and I pulled up from your website. So I was picturing these as the spinach squares as like a little bread square or rectangle with
Mm-mm.
like a cream spinach on top. But these are actually like a little spinach quiche where it's through the whole bite is
Yes.
spinach mixed in there and little layers of that.
Yes, because that's what I came across. I don't remember. I think I just came across them on Pinterest last year, and I was like, "Ooh, I need to make a
Yes.
keto version." And it is, um, yeah, it's perfect. It is like almost like a frittata, except
Mhm.
you make it a little drier with the coconut flour, so it's not quite so
Mhm.
eggy.
Yeah.
And
And it
yeah, it
uses
just works
frozen
beautifully.
spinach. It's like it's nothing that it's all relatively easy ingredients to have. And the one that someone may not normally have in their kitchen would be coconut flour, but after they've listened to this podcast and they're going to try some of the other things that Carolyn's talking about, if you don't normally have almond flour, coconut flour, we're going to be asking you bring it in, and then bringing in plant-based sweeteners like Swerve. And
Hmm.
Carolyn has different versions that she may use, the confectioner or granular, and sometimes even the brown Swerve. That the
I love the
confectioner,
brown swerve.
if you have those things like Swerve and then almond flour, coconut flour, you can be pretty nimble because you're using things that are these are recipes that you've seen or that are everyday recipes like these spinach squares, and then you're like, "Oh, this is delicious. Those cheese straws." There's not really unusual ingredients in there, but
Mm-mm.
and that's why we love them because these are the familiar kind of things that bring back these memories, or they have this texture, they have these things that we love around the holidays, and then you've kind of flipped them and reworked them to be
Hmm.
better for us. And so, still on the mission of how can we have our fully rounded dinner while we're standing up with finger foods. I love the spinach squares. You could also, could you take that same approach and then also put it into like the little mini quiches so that it did have a
Yeah,
crust? Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. Or little egg bites too would work. I have these little taco bites, I call them, and they're essentially I have a larger taco pie, which is essentially an egg pie. It's like a crustless quiche with taco meat in it, and I have the very same thing in a smaller version because they're just fun to eat.
Those are also really great brunch ideas if you're having
Hmm.
people over for brunch through the holidays. And then
Yeah.
so pie crust, and again, the pie crust that you have could be, you could fill it to make it sweet. You could fill it to make it savory, like we're talking about with the
Hmm.
spinach, using it to make mini quiche or mini tarts. Talk to me about crackers because that's another one that you've mastered the space of having kind of that salty crunch.
I love keto crackers. I have one recipe that's actually nut free. So for anybody who is like, oh no, all this almond flour stuff you're talking about, it's made with ground sunflower seeds. And it's hands down my favorite cracker recipe because I put Parmesan and fresh rosemary in. And I don't remember, I might have gotten the idea from a Trader Joe's product that I was like, yeah, I want rosemary crackers. That sounds great. And so I decided to make them nut free. Not that I need to be nut free, but I like to experiment. And it worked beautifully. And they're some of my favorites. I also have a cheddar, actually, it's a pepper jack cheese cracker, which is you blend a lot of pepper jack with almond flour and roll those out, and you can make them as big as or as small as you like. So if you want to make them like little bite-sized crackers, you can do that too. So those are really fun for cheese plates. And I will tell you that this isn't actually on my blog, but one of my favorite things to do for a cheese plate is to not even do crackers and to do what I call rosemary pecans, which is just a bunch of pecans cooked in a little butter, or you could do olive oil on a skillet until they start to brown. Lots of salt and pepper. Well, mostly I just do salt, sea salt, and fresh rosemary added right at the end. Take them off before they start to burn, and they are fabulous with cheese.
Wow.
Absolutely fabulous.
And big enough to sort of like hold that. And I was looking at your
Yeah,
recipe for the crackers, and so it's using the sunflower seed flour. So the trick here on the crackers, I would think, is rolling it out really thin,
it is. Yeah.
and then
And being patient as it
yeah,
bakes because they come out of the oven and they still feel soft. They tend to firm up as they cool, but if they're not perfectly firm, you can put them back in a warm oven. And if you live in a humid climate, again, they will soften as they sit, but then you can always just pop them back in a warm oven and they crisp up again.
And that's where you're rolling them out thin. And in this recipe, you say, like a 2 inch by 2 inch, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Like if someone is
No,
just as long as
mine
they're
are never
bite
perfect.
size, right? Okay. So crackers, the cheese straws, like we talked about, and then what about breads for holiday baking? What are some of the things that you do? Like if it's a holiday dinner that people are coming over, or if that's like what you're bringing to someone's home, if you've offered to bring, like, I don't know, do you do dinner rolls or would you do like loaf bread?
I have a dinner roll recipe, but I think you know the one that I love the most that I would probably do.
The one that's
And
the
you love
cheese
it too.
bread?
No, it's the focaccia.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, absolutely. Let's share that one. Yes.
The focaccia is one because it's super easy and because it looks and tastes like real
It's
focaccia,
so
in my opinion.
familiar.
And you can cut it into little bite-sized things. I've taken that same recipe and pressed it out further and made flatbread with it. I've topped the flatbread with, sauteed mushrooms and some sage and
Oh,
some
wow.
Parmesan or fontina,
Mhm.
Gruyere, something.
Mhm.
So you can play with that one too and make it into so many things. I do
Mhm.
have a dinner roll recipe, which is made with cheddar and garlic. Those are very hefty, I would say. They're hefty on the calorie front. So they're, unless you know that people are into that, I probably would go focaccia over those.
And it's in the focaccia, the rosemary focaccia is such a crowd pleaser. And like you said, it's not labor intensive. You're not having
Right.
to make things individually or roll the balls. And also,
Mm-hmm.
when we do have so much that's going on during the holidays, if we, there might be certain things that we're choosing to put more time into and put that more labor here. And so to have something that can be really kind of a quick and done is
Yeah.
also really, really appreciated. And so the rosemary focaccia on Carolyn's site is one of my favorites. Anyone I have had try it would have no idea that it was healthy, that was good for them, or that it didn't have regular flour in it. And I like your
Right.
idea of doing it even thinner and using it as a flatbread. And then you could put, like you said, the cheese, you could put mushrooms, spinach,
Mm-hmm.
and that could almost, you could even cut that into squares, I would think, and that could be
Mm-hmm. Yep.
an
Absolutely.
appetizer for a party. And then I think
Absolutely.
the last that we had talked about, but if there's more, then let's share, is scones, but taking these to more the savory side.
Yes, I have a couple of savory scone recipes that I really like. I have one from the cookbook from the Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking, and it's made. Those are they're so flavorful, but they're a little on the moist side because they're made with ricotta. But I love them. They go so well. The texture and flavor goes so well with all the herbs that are in them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really nice. I have a scone recipe that's just ham and cheese. Great thing to use if you've got leftover ham from the
Mm-hmm.
holidays. And then I have one that I saw this and it was just such a brilliant idea that I decided to make a keto version. Everything bagel scones.
Oh,
So
that's cool. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
those
really
are
cool.
great too. Those are a great brunch item if you're doing sort of eggs and bacon and not serving real bagels. Then the bagel scones, everything bagel scones are a good complement.
And those could be frozen also.
Yes, those are easily frozen. Scones are meant to be, even the ricotta ones, which are a little more moist, freeze well. But scones are meant to be sort of slightly dry and crumbly, but also tender at the same time, and so they hold up well to freezing.
One thing that I think about when someone, because we've talked a lot about gifts and kind of holiday baking and sweet and savory, and I already have ideas that I'm like, okay, I've got to make sure I put the time aside for these things because I think,
Mm-hmm.
spoiler alert, like I had thought that everyone might get candied cashews, but as I'm listening to this, I'm like, they may get a variation of cheese straws. We'll see what Molly's cheese straws turn out like. But what about if someone is doing casseroles or stuffings, and this may not be a space that you've stepped into that much? I can't remember if we talked about it in advance, but like here, like in the South, there's a lot of stuffings that are using breadcrumbs
Mm-hmm.
or like bread or breadcrumbs or even crackers that are like going, like we have like oyster dressing or stuffing. And
Right, right, right.
what would be your recommendation for if someone was going to take the step to lighten some of these? carb wise?
Well, I have a fantastic dressing or stuffing recipe that uses, it's called my cheesy skillet bread. It's one of my oldest bread recipes and it stood the test of time. People love it. It actually needs new photos on the blog, the poor thing. It's been neglected by me just because it's such a good recipe that I don't have to sort of keep updating it or keep taking new photos of it. Even though
Right.
I've made it a zillion times, I should just buckle down and get some new photos. But it dries out really nicely, and so it turns into really great stuffing or dressing. And I don't recommend using it as stuffing, mostly because you risk so using it as dressing, even though we call it stuffing.
Mhm.
But then I do, so you just dry it out. You let it, you cut it into cubes and either sit it in a warm oven or let it dry on your counter for a few days. And then you can treat it like any dressing, and you can add the eggs and the cream and the whatever you decide to add in normally. So I do sausage, like cooked crumbled sausage and sage, and it's delicious. But you can use almost any keto bread or low carb bread. Store bought, I generally don't say do that, but
Right.
because some of them, even the focaccia, like I was going to say, if you make a thing of the focaccia and it doesn't all get eaten and you think it's going to dry out, you know what you do? You dry it out and turn it into croutons. So it would
Right.
just make as good a stuffing as anything else.
Right. Right. And if it were something like a store bought gluten free or lower carb bread, while that may not be your favorite or our listeners' favorite from like a flavor or texture perspective, by the time you have it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of
You
dried out, you're mixing it with everything else.
right, right. It works perfectly. You can really use any bread there, and you can cut it into cubes. And a lot of them, classic like wheat based bread dries out easily because of the gluten and because of the way it's made. It just dries, and some gluten free breads probably dry out pretty easily too because of all the starches. Um, the ones made with almond flour and coconut flour can take a longer to dry out, but all you have to do is stick them in a like a 200-degree oven for
Hmm.
in cubes. They should already be cubed, and then they'll just dry into little hard nuggets that you can turn into any kind of dressing.
I feel like we need to do a quick public service announcement on the breads because there's a lot of just really bizarre low carb breads on the market that when you look at the ingredients, it's just strange. And the net carbs may be like one, but it's not quality or wholesome ingredients that
Right.
go into there. So Carolyn has an abundance of low carb breads, the cheesy skillet bread, or like the focaccia bread we talked about that's really easy. For a store bought, the one that I would recommend is a brand called Base Culture, and you can get it
Oh,
at Whole Foods, you can get it at Target. And have you tried this one, Carolyn?
I don't think I have.
Okay, the ingredients in it are like almonds, almond flour. It's just
Mm-hmm.
really, really simple ingredients um, that are all very wholesome, pure ingredients. And so it
Mm-hmm.
is it's a keto bread, it's low carb, gluten free, grain free, all of that. But base culture, like I know that you almost probably never have a need for a store bought bread, but if so, this try it because it may be one that would just give you like if someone says, really, like I don't have time to make my bread, I need a shortcut. Like this is one that I really like the ingredients
Mm-hmm.
on.
And okay, I haven't seen that one, but I would also say that some of the paleo ones, like there's
Mhm.
Mikey's, I think it's called Mikey's, and they're supposed to be English muffins, but they're just almond flour sort of English muffin shaped
Mhm.
things. You could easily turn that into. So if you
Yes.
need a store bought option, I would still on the paleo stuff because sometimes they add a bunch of tapioca
That's
starch
what I'm
and it
saying. Yeah, or just
jacks up the carbs.
like
But
high
they
amounts of
some of
like
them are low enough that you could probably
yeah.
do them.
But the tapioca starch or, high amounts of like of rice flour or
Yeah, right.
isolated fibers that are like in the like it's not a natural state. It's just very specific isolated fibers. And if you were to look at these as individual ingredients, they just would not be, it's not the things that you would normally be in your kitchen and baking with.
Right.
I'm actually going to send you the link to Base Culture now while I'm thinking of
Oh,
it because
okay.
I'm
I'll
like,
definitely check them out
yeah, check it
because
out.
my thing is sometimes, I'm doing so much for writing recipes for the blog that sometimes I run up against the holidays and I'm like, oh, crap. Now I
Yes.
don't have to, now I don't have time to make the
Right.
bread for. That's
Yeah, for stuffing
sometimes
or
I run out of
something.
time too.
Yes. And so I think like, hearing Carolyn and just the things that we were talking about too, this is what she does. This is Carolyn's focus. This is her area of expertise. This is her space where she is an expert in the art and science of this. And so for us as consumers, we can turn to Carolyn and say, "Hey, please guide us. Show us what works. Show us, what you've learned." And like she's doing all this the hard work for us so that we can, we don't have to make all those mistakes and we don't have to have all the trial and error. And then also knowing that Carolyn runs up against a time clock too sometimes. And so,
Yeah.
having those shortcuts and also in your recipes, you're really good about including so much detail about you could
Hmm.
try this, or if you're doing this, be aware of these things. So everything is very educational as you're in your recipes as well. Is there anything else that's coming to mind on holidays to inspire our listeners to try, whether it's for parties they're hosting, parties they're going to, gifts they're gifting?
Well, I know that you just came out with a cocktail book, so like you got to try some of the cocktails, right? And they don't have to be alcoholic; they can be zero proof too.
You're
They can be,
right.
yeah.
Thank you for the
You got to
plug.
have something like that.
Right. So if you're bringing a drink, craft, the Eat Fit Guide to Zero Proof Cocktails is our book. I think Carolyn has one on the way to you, and I can't wait till you flip through and see the photos.
Oh, me too. I'm excited.
Our dietitian, the photographer is our dietitian for our Monroe region, Eat Fit Monroe, and Hope Fruge is her name, and she did the photography for it. And she's a dietitian, but she had worked for Edible Nashville magazine and had done
Oh,
photography for
wow.
them. And so she was just, I mean, she just brought these drinks to life. And so, yes, thank you for that. So the craft is our new book, and it's a drink book that is using these sweeteners that Carolyn is using in baking, and we've used these to create simple syrups. And so it's your Eat Fit
Hmm.
simple syrup to make a drink with. And then all these different spirits that are zero proof spirits. And, some of the recipes, we have one that's like a French 75, and you can make the base of it, which is a zero proof gin and the Eat Fit simple syrup with the plant based sweeteners, like, So it's the zero proof gin, the Eat Fit simple syrup, and some lemon juice. And that's sort of the base. And then you top it off with champagne or the zero proof champagne.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've been suggesting, and we're actually doing it for a party this weekend coming up, is making that base with the zero proof gin and the Eat Fit simple syrup and the lemon juice, and in a little dispenser that people can, a pitcher that you would like pour, and then having both options, regular
Hmm.
champagne or the zero proof sparkling. And so people could go either way. And then it's not like
Right.
it's not the punish table over there that someone's relegated to the non-alcoholic table. Like you've got this
Right.
option and you can, yeah,
Exactly.
try both. So, yeah. So really, I think the takeaway from that layered in with everything that Carolyn has shared with us is rethinking and just like revisiting some of these favorites that have been our go-to. And
Hmm.
is there a way that we can still really enjoy these, have these really great quality dishes made with quality ingredients, and they're also better for us?
Yeah. I mean, that is sort of my goal in life, is always thinking about things that I love and don't, that aren't the conventional version, is certainly not even close to keto, and then trying to find a way to make it and
Right.
make it live up to the original.
Right, right. Oh, I love this. So we'll link to Carolyn's website. I'll also put a link to the book that we mentioned, The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking. And yeah, I really appreciate your time on this. I can't wait to give some of these a try. And I'm also going to take your advice to start early and freeze.
Yeah, yeah, definitely helps.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Carolyn is always such a wealth of information. She's also such a source of inspiration and just such an expert on low carb, specifically gluten free baking. She's a perfectionist, and that perfectionism really benefits all of us. I'll include the links that we talked about in the show notes of this episode, including her book, which is essentially a low carb, gluten free baking Bible, also her website, which is just a tremendous resource for us. And let me know what you think as you're trying some of these baking ideas for holiday gifting or for holiday events. We always want to hear about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more fueled wellness and nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of fueled wellness and nutrition. Thanks for listening and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.